Warhammer 3 map is on a grand scale, and according to Creative Assembly, it's more than twice the size of the Vortex map from Game 2, dwarfing its predecessor. That makes for a massive area to fill, with new races and legendary lords, hopefully far more than we saw previously. With that much room, every race from Games 1 and 2, that's right, every one of the 14 we have seen so far, should find their way into the main campaign of Game 3, unlike Game 2, where one or two missed out. That's something I'm very excited about, so in today's video, I'm going to go through the top 6 races that I'm looking forward to the most, being added to the Game 3 campaign. We'll start at number 6, and work our way to the top. So coming in at number 6 is one of the most played, and perhaps beloved races from Game 1, the Empire. They are the focus of much of the lore and what happens in the Warhammer world. They did get a decent amount of attention in Game 1, receiving 3 lords, with Karl Franz and Balthazar Gelt at launch, and the Supreme Mustache, Volkmar the Grim, joining them in the Grim and the Grave Lord pack. In Game 2, we saw Marcus Wolfheart added in the Jungles of Lustria, appearing as part of the Hunter and the Beast DLC. So from the first 2 games they bagged 4 lords. Not the greatest of showings, especially for a race which has so much lore and so many potential legendary lords. Well, I expect that to change for the Empire in Warhammer 3. With the focus shifting from the lands of Lustria and Ulthuan back to the old world, the Empire finds itself taking up a sizable portion of the map, enough to warrant another 3 or perhaps 4 legendary lords. We should see Boris Todbringer get the full treatment and receive a spot as a playable lord on the campaign. We may meet the Mad Count, Marius Leitdorf, who despite his reputation was one of the Empire's most staunch protectors. We could see a faction led by the Prophet of Sigmar, Luthor Huss, that leans heavily into religion and a mighty crusade against chaos. Or we might see any number of the other Elector Counts of the Empire: Theodoric Gosseur, Valmir von Rakoff, Emmanuel von Lipwitz, or perhaps her sorceress advisor, Elspeth von Draken. Each have their own story to tell. At number 5, but not quite alive, we have the Vampire Counts, one of the few factions that rival the Empire for number of characters. It seems that around every corner, and in every graveyard of the Empire, there is a vampire or necromancer looking to stir up trouble. The Vampire Counts are another faction that was introduced in Game 1, receiving 2 lords at launch, Manfred von Karstein and Heinrich Kemmler, along with Helmund Gorst in the Grim and the Grave DLC. They then received 2 more legendary lords through FLC, Vlad and Isabella von Karstein, giving them the most lords of any Game 1 faction, until the Dwarfs and Greenskins got their 5th legendary lord in Game 2. But while they have a variety of lords to choose from, they all pretty much play the same, as they have no real unique mechanics to give their campaigns variety, and they are all situated on the edge of the Empire, with 4 of the lords starting within 2 provinces, meaning you are facing the same enemies and striving for the same victory conditions. They are in serious need of an overhaul, with new mechanics, new and more varied starting positions, and some new blood. Up until this point, we have seen either old wrinkly necromancers, or members of the von Karstein family. We have yet to see any of the other vampire bloodlines. Let us have a Blood Dragon Lord, a Necrarch or a Strigoi start somewhere else completely, or give us perhaps one of the most requested legendary lords, Neferata, who would represent the Lamian bloodline. I'm eager to see each of the bloodlines explored, and see Creative Assembly use the unique lore of each to give us some much needed variety. Number 4. Surprise surprise, it's another Game 1 race. It's the Greenskins. The Orcs and Goblins, as they were once known, have fared very well in Games 1 and 2. They received 4 lords in Game 1, with Grimgor and Azag at launch, Skarsnik in the King and the Warlord DLC, and Wurzag joining as an FLC. Then in Game 2, they got a huge mechanics overhaul, taking them from one of the worst factions to play to one of the best. On top of that, they received a 5th legendary lord in Grom, added with some wonderful cooking mechanics in the Warden and the Paunch DLC. They are in a very good place, not needing an overhaul, or really not in desperate need of a new legendary lord in the short term, but they are now so much fun to play with their roster and WoW mechanics that it would be criminal not to have them added to Game 3's main campaign as soon as possible. They still have a good variety of legendary lords, both orcs and goblins to choose from, but I'm hoping that we might see Creative Assembly expand upon one of the sub-factions, the Forest Goblins. It would be great to have Greenskins with a twist, where the forests are your friends, and we already have a number of their units in the game. Regardless of which lords we would receive, I just want to do some clobbering of the Humies. Making their way out of the deserts and into the third spot are the Tomb Kings. We have seen with the release of the Twisted and the Twilight that Creative Assembly is willing to release DLC for DLC, and I have absolutely no issue with that as long as I'm getting a quality product for races that I am interested in. The Tomb Kings were of course added as a race pack in Game 2, giving us access to 4 legendary lords in distinct starting positions. We have Settra the Imperishable, perhaps the greatest king of ancient Nehekara. There's High Queen Khalida, who has a thing for snakes and a bitter rivalry with Neferata. Then we have Arkan the Black, who doesn't exactly get along with his mummified colleagues, preferring the company of vampires. And finally, there is Grand Hierophant Ketep, who finds himself in exile in Nagarond. I love the Tomb Kings. Their aesthetic, their playstyle, their roster, it all works so well, and I think they are the best DLC that Creative Assembly has released to date. That's why I want to see them added in Game 3, and not forgotten. They still have a host of characters to choose from that could show up in Game 3. 2 in particular strike me as excellent contenders. There is the cursed Scarab Lord Apophis, who searches the world for a soul to bargain for his release from the underworld, and there is the Necrotect of Qatar, Ramotep the Visionary, who has sworn vengeance against the men of the old world who defiled his ancient monuments. Apophis could start anywhere as he hunts a worthy soul, and Ramotep could begin his journey on the edge of the Empire, poised to lay waste to the lands of men. While the Tomb King roster is well fleshed out, obvious pun intended, there are more units we could see. The Carrion Wraith Riders would be a welcome addition, and I would absolutely love to see the Kemric Titan make an appearance. Please CA, make it happen. In second place are the Defenders of the Forests and Masters of the Bow, the Wood Elves. They were introduced in Game 1 with the Realm of the Wood Elves DLC. This gave us Durthu and Orion as legendary lords, and also gave us the horrible Ember mechanic. Thankfully, the Wood Elves saw an update late in Warhammer 2 with the fantastic Twisted and the Twilight DLC, which introduced the Sisters of Twilight as the 3rd legendary lord. As a bonus for anyone who owned the Wood Elves race pack, we also received Dryka for the Mortal Empires campaign. While the new lords were great, it was the overhaul of the mechanics for the Wood Elves that really impressed, taking them from a race that hardly moved from Athel Loren to the globetrotters of the Warhammer world, with the Worldroot system and the Sacred Groves. They are now a delight to play. They are one of my favourite factions, and with the inclusion of the Witch's Wood on the Game 3 map, they would be in the thick of the battle against Norska and the Demons of Chaos. There are then several woods that could act as Sacred Groves for their mechanic, allowing their campaign the flexibility we have enjoyed in Warhammer 2. They do have a few lord choices still available, such as Arloth, the Lord of Talsin, Thalandor, the Doomstar, or Skor the Falconer. Whichever character is added, the Wood Elves, however, will undoubtedly come as an FLC lord, as they have very little that they are missing, and certainly not enough to justify a place in a lord pack. I for one can't wait to play as Wood Elves on the main campaign, and use Kugath Plaguefather as my personal pincushion. So, who is number 1? Could it be the High Elves? Perhaps the Lizardmen? Of course, it has to be the Skaven. Yes, yes! Well, no. It's the remaining core race from Game 1, my favourite race in the entire franchise. The Dwarfs. Sitting pretty with 5 legendary lords, the Dwarfs are in a fairly good place. Thorgrim Grudgebearer and Ungrim Ironfist were the first 2 lords included in Warhammer 1. Grombindel then joined them as an FLC, and Belagar Ironhammer was added as part of the King and the Warlord DLC. Then later in Game 2, Thoric Ironbrow was added as an FLC Lord alongside the Silence and the Fury, where the Dwarves also received a bit of an upgrade, with rune magic and an expansion of their forge mechanic. The starting locations are quite varied, leading to different campaigns, though Grombindel deserves his own spot out in the world. What are the Dwarves missing? Well, several of their most well-known characters, Joseph Bugman, Malachi Mackayson, and Grim Berlikson. They are also missing several units, such as the Rune Golems, Steam Drills, and what would be a centerpiece of any Dwarf army, the Thunder Barge. They have so many potential starting locations, whether we see someone starting in Zufbar, or further north at Krakadrak, or out in the Mountains of Morn in one of the Lost Holds. They are the one addition to the main campaign that I would like above all others. Anyone who disagrees is going in the book. But there we have it, the 6 races I would like to see appear first in Warhammer 3 on the main campaign. What would be your top 6? What are the races that you really want to see take on the Realms of Chaos? If you enjoyed this video, why not leave a like, share or subscribe? If you'd like to see more content, then you can also follow me on Twitter and find me on Twitch. The links will be in the description below. I'd like to thank my patrons for their continued support. Big shout out to Hot Apple Pie and Solarith Magnetar. I'm Grey Tiger, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.